Well, let me say it's a pleasure to be here. I am delighted that you have invited me. And I came last Sunday to hear Gary Lagerlof's sermon to you all, and to also get some feeling for this congregation. And I want to tell you, I think this is an amazing church. I've been so impressed. I love the way you bring nature right into your sanctuary. Jennifer and I were talking about how maybe we could do this in our house. I've been delighted by the welcoming spirit of your minister and of the congregation, Kathy and Jane and others. And of course, I am so pleased that you picked up on the offer of the Interfaith Climate Circle to make use of some of our members to speak with you as part of your Caring for Creation series. And of course, on May 12th, you'll have Jennifer Wilhoit, who is also here today. You have a book group, serious book group, and I have discovered that you are a very sophisticated community, well-informed, embracing of the issues of our time, and formed as a community that can take on these kinds of issues. How many of you were here last Sunday? Excellent, most of you. So I want you to take a moment and bring back your memory of Gary's presentation. And I want you to remember how it made you feel. Remember, he put up all those slides with the data going up and up and up, and he had a video of what's happening to the Arctic Sea, and he had maps of how the sea is rising. Remember how you felt. What emotions did his presentation evoke for you? Terror, okay. Despair. Right. What's that one?
Sadness.
So, I don't hear so well, so I have to.
Sadness.
Sadness, terror, despair. Okay. Thank you. So this was a real winner. You know, my husband, who is here, David Korten, sometimes says, if you're not feeling despair, you're not paying attention. Yeah, that's sort of where we are. You know, I went to your book group. This book group is reading So That We and Our Children May Live. This is not bedtime reading. This is serious stuff. And basically, it says we have to change everything. We have to stop our extractive economy that's ruining other people's places as well as our own. We have to embrace the ways of living of native people who have learned how to live with this earth. We have to change everything. So the focus last week was on chapters 5 and 6. And I noticed as the discussion went around, it felt to me like the energy in the room went down. Down and down. Because it's so overwhelming. And people kind of talked a little bit about what can we do, but we can't do really anything because it's so big. So I had gone to that. And I came last week partly to discover what might I offer to you in this little moment that I have. And of course, as I say, I learned you are a very sophisticated congregation. I don't need to tell you about the problems of climate change. I don't need to tell you that it's urgent. I don't need to tell you that we need to change a whole lot about many, many of our systems. You already know that. So what could I offer? And what I realized is that when you know all that, you feel despair. And of course, despair can set in paralysis. And that is the last thing we need. We cannot wallow in our despair. We cannot feel paralyzed. We cannot feel that, oh, there's nothing I can do because it's all so big. We need to feel strong and empowered, and we need an antidote to despair. So, thank you very much. You've helped me figure out what I can speak to you about, and that's my job. So, I have 3 steps that I recommend as your antidote to despair. The first one is to pay attention to visionary ideas and practical actions. So that was one of the several mottos of Yes Magazine, visionary ideas and practical actions. So I want to tell you kind of a little story of my coming to Yes Magazine and why I bothered to do that. So I was working as a program officer at the Ford Foundation in 1997. I had been there for 20 years, partly in Manila and partly in Jakarta. The Ford Foundation has offices around the world. And then I was in New York. That's when David wrote When Corporations Rule the World. So there I am at the time, the biggest foundation in the world. And I get invited to come and be the executive director of this little magazine on Bainbridge Island, founded, among others, by Sarah Van Gelder, who I think many of you know, and my husband, David Korten. I was not a founder. I was barely paying attention. But I got invited, and I was intrigued because, as Alan mentioned, and Pastor Amara, it had stories that you don't find anyplace else. The media is very attuned to feeding you very bad news. That's what they feel draws readers, and it heightens subscriptions, and that's what they feed you. But that's not all that's going on, and it's not all that we need. So yes, we need to understand the problems, but if we don't have some sense of what we can do, where good things are happening, and guided by visionary ideas, then we're in deep trouble. So what I liked about Yes was these positive stories were not sweet stories. They weren't kind of somebody being nice to somebody else. These were guided by some kind of vision of how do we take on some of the biggest problems of our time. An economy that can be so harmful, racism, or the inequality that we all live with. How can we take these problems on? And then accompanying that kind of visionary essay would be examples of people actually taking on that particular problem. So that combination struck me as really important. And so in 1998, Dave and I left New York. I left this job with the Ford Foundation, which I had loved, to take on this little magazine that was struggling might possibly not survive, and see if I could help it grow. So I stayed there for 19 years, and we did. So my recommendation to you, my first recommendation as your antidote to despair, is pay attention to those positive visions and the practical actions that can accompany them. So I just want to give you a flavor of that. A few things that kind of have stayed in my mind that happened over this last week, okay? So when I think about what's happened this last week, I think about how Biden announced the American Climate Corps. Did you follow that? 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds or whoever flowing into a climate corps, probably learning carpentry and plumbing and being an electrician, because that's what we need. We need insulation for houses, and we need solar panels, and we need all kinds of things that require those trades. Excellent. Okay, I don't know if you followed that the EPA put out a rule that limits tailpipe emissions on cars and trucks. One expert I read said this particular rule will have the biggest impact to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions than any other climate rule in the nation's history. It's easy to miss these things. Okay, one more. Dave and I, last Monday, went to this movie, Common Ground. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about regenerative agriculture, which, of course, is a fabulous solution to many of our problems. The thing that struck me was that the committee of our Congress that develops the Farm Bill, which funds most of the really bad agriculture, had a full day in which those Congress people listened to farmers who practice regenerative agriculture. That's a first. They have never done that before. Okay, so you can see, you can just attune your mind to some of the positive things that are happening, and it begins to feel like, wow, you know, things are happening that are good, and maybe there's hope. Okay, they feed your imagination. So the second thing I recommend as an antidote to despair is one you well know, and that is to take action. So when you take action, you're no longer stationary, you're moving, you feed your energy, and you feel empowered. You feel like, yeah, maybe I can contribute, even if it's very small. And my third recommendation is whatever you do, do it with others. We all need support in whatever we do. I belong to several different activist organizations at various levels at our state, national, and Bainbridge. And I'm just one of a group for every one of those things. And that's the only way I could do it. Otherwise, I would lose heart and probably drop out. So if you're supposed to take action, what are these actions you're supposed to take? Well, there's lots, and I'm sure you know. And what is interesting, I think, is that there's many different levels. Now, when you go to your coffee hour, you're going to be able to pick up a sheet that Kathy made copies of for me. Thank you, Kathy. Called 16 Things You Can Do About Climate Change. And this is from one of my favorite bloggers, Jessica Carvin, who publishes Chop Wood, Carry Water. She makes a recommendation for action every single day, most of which I do not do. But I liked her list of 16 things because there are all these different levels. So they're at the individual level. Okay, make your lawn, shrink your lawn. Don't use fluffy toilet paper. How about that? Okay. Be an advocate. Join organizations that are advocacy organizations. You know many of them. On climate, certainly a great one is 350.org for Washington, because it's so tuned into what's happening here. But there are many. I belong to Third Act. That's that's an organization specifically for those of us who are a little over 65. And I think some of you might qualify. So it's very strategic. It's founded by Bill McKibben, and it addresses many different problems. And when you're part of a group, then you know that what you're doing is adding to a larger impact. So being part of some other group is really helpful. And since we're talking about advocacy, I want to hone in on one particular thing I want you to be sure to be informed about. Gary mentioned it last week very briefly, but it deserves more than brief. And it is about this initiative number 2117. It's an initiative to repeal the Climate Commitment Act that the Washington State Legislature passed in 2021. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I have a handout for you that you can also get in the coffee room, and it will, in very unimpassioned language, explain to you what this initiative does, who's behind it, what the arguments for it are, what the arguments against it are, and who is backing it and who is opposed. I'll just mention one group that happens to be opposed, the Suquamish tribe. Okay, all righty, so that's another handout for you. So of course, doing whatever you do with others is what counts. And of course, the fact that you're a church is so perfect because you're already doing things together, and you could even do things as a church. So I read your council meeting minutes, and I saw that when you repair the roof on this church, you're going to make sure it's being done in a way that would prepare it for solar panels someday. Excellent. Okay, my church is also talking with the Island School about putting solar panels on the roof. So let me just review the 3 antidotes to despair. Pay attention to visionary ideas and practical actions that can feed your soul. Take action yourself in various ways and do it with others. All right, it's my great honor to have this chance to speak with you. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll stick around for the coffee hour too. But in closing, I want to offer a prayer. O Creator God, we come before you, recognizing that all of your creation is interconnected. We hear the cries of earth and embrace the urgent need for action. Grant us wisdom to discern solutions, the courage to take bold action, and the compassion to care for those most afflicted. Give us the strength to move forward, to work together in solidarity, and to know that our actions are one part of a global response to restore Earth so that all beings may flourish. And guide us to carry out our work with love, justice, and profound reverence for all of life. Amen. Thank you.